Club Solutions Magazine podcast. Today, I'm joined by Bryan Myers, CEO of solidcore, one of the most recognizable and fastest growing brands in the boutique fitness space. Under Bryan's leadership, solidcore has expanded to over 150 locations with a lot more growth on the horizon. In this conversation, we dive into the brand's recent majority investment from L Catterton, what sustainable growth really looks like in boutique fitness, and how solidcore is doubling down on product excellence, community, and innovation. We also discuss Bryan's philosophy on leadership, the challenge of scaling culture, and how solidcore is working to set a new industry standard for long-term success. Enjoy. Well, Bryan, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, for those who may be unfamiliar with solidcore, I don't think there's many that are, but for those who aren't, can you just give an overview of the company for someone who's maybe never experienced it before?
Absolutely. Well, first, I'll start with the workout. Solid Core is a 50-minute strength training workout that we do on a custom reformer. And so it's all of your traditional strength training moves, things plank, lunges, squats, traditional upper body movements like bicep curls, tricep kickbacks, etc. Except we do all of those on a reformer. So if you've seen a Pilates reformer, it's something very similar to that, but we made our own and added some bells and whistles. And so it's using spring-based resistance that's designed to get your muscles to that point of failure where they're shaking uncontrollably and they have no choice but to build back stronger. So that's the workout. The business itself has been around for almost 12 years, was founded in Washington, D.C., but we now operate about 150 locations across 26 states and the district. So it's been a really fun journey to bring solidcore and our transformative workout to communities all over the country through a company-owned and operated model, which is not as common in boutique fitness.
No, not at all. So that's awesome. And then for those who are unfamiliar with your journey, talk about how you became CEO. You actually started off as a customer, right?
That's true. Yeah, I took my first solidcore class 11 years ago, which is crazy to think about in the very early days of the solidcore story, really. But I'll actually rewind a little bit further. I'll start kind of at the beginning and just say I grew up bouncing around a bunch. My dad was in the military. My parents came from poor Black communities in the South, North and South Carolina. And despite not having been surrounded by business people, I always had a nerdy obsession with business. And so I'll fast forward now and say it was no surprise that when I went to college that I wanted to go to college and study business. And so that's what I did. I attended the University of Virginia here in the great state of Virginia, where our headquarters is now, and graduated from school and decided to go into business strategy consulting because I figured that would be a great way for me to get exposure to a bunch of different types of businesses, different functional areas within business, and then figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I left my career in consulting and ultimately joined the leadership team of a company called Sweetgreen. Many people know it now because it's become more of a known brand. But when I joined, Sweetgreen only had about 20 restaurants, primarily here in the DC metro area. And I got to be a part of that growth story, helping scale that concept from about 20 locations to 100. It was actually while I was at Sweetgreen that I took my first solidcore class. Someone who went to college with me told me to come take class. They've become one of the very early coaches at solidcore. And as they say, the rest is history. I became a loyal and dedicated solidcore client while I was working in kind of growing this brick and mortar retail business. And then a few years later, someone ended up introducing me to the founder of solidcore. And here I am, 7.5 years from that conversation, now the CEO of this business, and I've been CEO for about 4 years.
Yeah, awesome. Such a great journey. Well, let's talk a little bit about growth because solidcore has had impressive growth over the last, 5, 6 years, especially since you guys got a recent investment from, was it L Catterman?
L Catterton, yeah.
Okay, L Catterton. Okay, well, tell me a little bit about the impact that investment has had and what your growth goals are currently.
Absolutely. So solidcore, like you said, is a growth company. So when I joined this business 7.5 years ago, we had about 25 locations. Fast forward not that long, and when you subtract the years of COVID where there wasn't a ton of growth going on, we've made a lot of strides very quickly. And we've had various private equity partners along the way that have supported that growth. But I think I would say the same thing about L Catterton that I say about all of them, which is the capital is one thing, and you definitely need capital to be able to grow a business like ours, particularly in a company owned and operated model. But what I think is more valuable about the relationships that we build with our private equity partners, L Catterton and others over the years, is a relationship where we are able to leverage their expertise across a number of areas to make smarter decisions as we grow and scale our company. And so L Catterton specifically focuses exclusively on consumer-oriented businesses, and many of their consumer-oriented businesses speak to a very similar consumer to the solidcore client. And so they have been helpful for us over the last 6 or 7 months of our relationship in a number of ways. One, they've helped us think about our consumer in a sort of more nuanced way. So we've done a lot of interesting, deep consumer insights work, both qualitative and quantitative. Two, they have their pulse because of their portfolio of brands on the larger macroeconomic environment and how it may be impacting or how it may impact in the future who our consumer is and even the suppliers of our business. And so we thought a lot about how we continue to mitigate risk and insulate the business from some of those ups and downs that we're experiencing from a volatility standpoint in the market. And last, they really understand the talent that's required to grow and scale these businesses. And so they've been incredible thought partners to me, but also our broader leadership team, as we've thought about what are the boxes and sticks that should be on the org chart as we think about growing this business relatively rapidly as we look into the future, but also not just the boxes and sticks, but like when we actually start talking to candidates, what are those things that we should be listening for and looking for from an experience standpoint that are really going to help us build a strong, durable, sustainable business?
Yeah. Let's talk about the sustainability, because the fitness industry doesn't necessarily have a great reputation from a private equity standpoint due to the lack of sustainability of certain fitness brands. So talk to me a little bit about how you guys are approaching that sustainable growth.
I have a view that is honestly not as common in fitness as I would have expected. But you're right in that, fitness as an industry, and particularly boutique fitness as a niche within the broader fitness landscape, has a reputation for having these like boom and bust cycles, right? There's something that's really popular and then like it dies off and it's never to be heard from again. And you can think about like even workouts that like my parents did when I was growing up, like what happened to Taibo, right? Like, things like that. So it's like it has these moments where things come into the cultural zeitgeist, they're really popular and then they fade away. And my fundamental belief is that fitness is no different than any other consumer brand or product. But as an industry, we are less mature as some of these other consumer-oriented industries like restaurants, like hardware and other goods. And so what we try to do at solidcore is really run our business not just like a best-in-class fitness company, but also a best-in-class consumer company. And so what I talked about in terms of getting deep insights in terms of who our consumer is, how their taste and preferences may be evolving and changing. That's a muscle that folks in the technology sector, as an example, or soft goods retail like clothing, and they do this in their sleep, because if they didn't, those businesses wouldn't survive long term. As humans, things change. What we like changes, how we like to do them, how we like to be spoken to about them. All of that is constantly changing and evolving. And so as a leadership team, we think a lot about really deeply understanding our consumers so that as they evolve, we are evolving alongside them and continuing to stay relevant. So that's the first bucket. And then the second bucket that I think a lot about is building a team that has experience beyond fitness. Because again, we can learn a lot from these other industries that have been around for sometimes hundreds of years, and have developed these really critical muscles for building long-term sustainable businesses. And so when you look across our team, we have people who are from the technology world, from SaaS businesses, from consulting, from accounting firms, and everything in between. And it's because we want that expertise around the table here. We want those perspectives, those learnings from those other mature businesses, and how do we take them and apply them to a boutique fitness sort of landscape. And so those are the two things that have been important for me.
Yeah. I do feel like the fitness industry can be in a little bit of an echo chamber at times because it can be very siloed. So I think that's very interesting.
And it's really, I think the other thing that happens within boutique fitness, which is no fault of boutique or fitness generally, is that for a long time, and this is evolving in a way that I think will be really beneficial for our industry, but for a long time, people thought about fitness as, I was going to say recreation, but it's even like sort of quote less than that. It's like people think about it as a hobby. And so people who are like professionals with quote real experience, who have spent decades working in soft goods retail, like they weren't thinking about building a career in fitness because that's what I do in my free time. That's not a quote real job. That's not a serious industry. And I think what's starting to happen now is our industry, as it's growing and maturing itself, is starting to develop a reputation for a place where you can go and build a meaningful career. And so the talent that we've been able to attract at solidcore, and even our peers in the industry, the talent that we've been able to attract into the industry generally, is starting to evolve and elevate in ways that I think, like I said, will be beneficial, not just solidcore, but to the industry more holistically.
For sure. Yeah, let's talk more about how solidcore approaches talent acquisition and retention, especially on the coaching side, because you
Yes.
guys do ensure a livable and profitable salary. Talk a little bit about your philosophy.
So talent is really core to what we do and who we are. No pun intended with solidcore, but talent really is so tantamount to our success. And the analogy that I like to give is when I think about my time at Sweetgreen, we also said that talent was really important and having, a great guest experience was really important to us. But I will also tell you that if you go into Sweetgreen and you walk down the line and you order a Caesar salad, and the person on the other side of the line is having a bad day, they're going through a breakup, they have an attitude, whatever. It's a less than stellar experience, but when you bite into the Caesar salad, it's still going to taste great.
Yeah.
The difference in our industry, and particularly at solidcore, because of the role of the coach in the room, if your coach gives you attitude, is not present because they're thinking about the breakup that they're going through, the experience is totally different, and the product what you bought is fundamentally different and changed. And so because of that, we really try to think about our team members, particularly at the coach level, the ones who are sort of most directly engaging with our consumer, as like the linchpin that keeps it all together. And so when we think about everything from where we find these people, how we train these people, how we compensate and motivate these people, and how we retain these people over time, it really is done through that lens. So very tactically, one of the things that we think about is like building a best-in-class recruitment function that can really highlight the benefits of building a career in fitness, whether it's going to be your primary sort of source of income, or we have a number of people, frankly the vast majority of our more than 2,000 coaches now do this as a side hustle, but still to be able to speak to someone about these are the skills that you're going to develop by being a coach, right? Like how to respond under pressure, confidence in speaking in front of groups, like so many of these skills that actually translate to other aspects of your life.
For sure.
Talk to them about that. You're going to be able to show progression in your career because like we have different levels of coaching. So many things that we think about when we're selling someone on why solidcore is a great place to work. So it starts there. And then we get them in and we make sure that we provide them a best-in-class training regimen, right? That really teaches them not just over the course of a day or two, but over the course of several weeks and many hours, how to be a great solidcore coach, how to connect and provide accountability to clients, how to understand the body, how to respond when someone's at this fitness level versus a different fitness level. So we really try to give them a great experience that's going to set them up for success when they enter the room. And then on the flip side of that, we provide them ongoing support, right? So there's a training manager, there are lead head coaches in each market who, again, are there to provide them that ongoing reinforcement, that ongoing continuing ed that's going to allow them to stay comfortable and confident in their job and continue to elevate over the course of their career here at solidcore. And then, of course, there's how do we motivate and inspire them? And we think about that in a number of different ways. Of course, there's the financial, and we believe that we have a really compelling financial offering. Just to be transparent, our highest performing coaches at our highest volume studios can make $300+ a class. Right?
Oh.
That's a lot of money for someone who is either doing this full time, or even if you're doing it as a side hustle and you're coaching 6 or 8 classes a week and you're making an extra, $2,000 to $2,500 a week as a side hustle, like that's great income. And so we do that for our full-time coaches. We offer all of the benefits that you might think, right? Like health benefits, 401k with a match, like all of the things that you think about when you think about building a long-term career. And then for all of our team members, we are private equity backed, and that means that at some point our private equity sponsor is going to want liquidity and sell this business to someone else. And people who are here and have dedicated meaningful time to building a career, whether they're full-time or part-time, will be able to reap in the benefits of that transaction, right? So we had people who are part-time employees here through our last transaction when L Catterton acquired this business, who received checks for $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, which is pretty much unheard of, not just in fitness, but in any part-time job. And so
Yeah.
we're really proud of building a comprehensive suite of sort of both approaches and benefits that allow people to build meaningful careers.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that because your coaches are basically the product, the experience is the product, you have to be just as intentional about the employee experience as you are about the customer.
Yes, absolutely. Because like you said, the employee experience begets the customer experience, right? And so
Yeah.
to the extent that we have any lapses in that, and we're not perfect, so I should have led with that, right? Like we are certainly not perfect. We are always thinking
Well,
about
no
ways
one
to
is.
improve, but like we invest a lot of time thinking about how do we turn up the heat on our employee experience just a little bit more each day.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, let's talk a little bit about the customer experience because we don't want to completely neglect that, as Solidcore has such a great reputation for creating raving fans. Talk to me a little bit about kind of the philosophy and strategy behind how you're able to achieve that.
The first thing I would say is the effectiveness of the workout. People come into the space looking for something that's going to be worth their money. Boutique fitness is not cheap, but more importantly, worth their time. When I coach, one of the things that I say to my clients when I'm on the mic is you might walk out and find 20, 30, $40 on the sidewalk and recoup every dollar that you invested in this experience. But what you will never, ever recoup, because life just doesn't work this way, is the 50 minutes that you dedicate here. And so
Yeah.
people want to make sure that they're getting something out of their time. And when people talk about solid core, the number one thing that they talk about is just how effective it is. Right? Like
Yes.
people are like, there are lots of people who have walked into the doors of a solid core. Frankly, over 1 million people have walked into the doors of a solid core over the lifetime of the brand. And some of those people have walked out and solid core has become a foundational part of their routine. And others have walked out and said, that's not for me. But I've never heard someone walk out and go, I'm not sure if that worked. And
Yeah.
that's a very powerful place to start, right? So the effectiveness of the product is the first thing. But the second thing is this notion of community. When people walk into the experience and you do something hard with someone next to you, right? It's like people talk about quote, being in the trenches. That's what it feels like. Solid core is a challenging workout. When you do that with someone, it creates this bond. Like I know something about you. Like I often give this example when I talk about this. My dad was in the military. He was a Marine. And, when he drives down the street and he sees someone's bumper sticker that says USMC, there's like a mutual respect, right? It's like we've been through something together and there's a tie that binds us because of that experience. And that community connectivity is something that's really powerful at Solid Core. When you walk down the street and you're wearing a hoodie or a t-shirt or shorts, leggings that have the bracket tattoo, people are like, I get that. I get you, and you being in this space tells me something about who you are as an individual and how you approach life. And that community connection is really important. But the last thing is something that money can't buy. And I'm so grateful to lead a company that has this impact on people. And it's that Solid Core, despite the fact that it's, quote, just a workout, means so much more to the people who take this workout. And when I took my first class 11 years ago, I noted it because there were people who had the Solid Core logo tattooed on their body. And in the early days, I was like, well, what is that about, right?
Yeah.
And I feel very fortunate, like I said, that Solid Core is one of the few brands in the world, not just in fitness, not just in consumer, but few brands in the world at all, where there are hundreds of people who walk around the brackets tattooed on their body, right? The logo tattooed on their body. But because of how impactful Solid Core is, you get stories that step outside of the studio, where like people talk about recovering from cancer treatment and solid core being the first place where they felt strong again. You hear people talk about rediscovering their identity after becoming a parent for the first time and being like, oh my gosh, I lost myself. And these 50 minutes reminded me that I'm worthy of time for me. We had someone who wrote in and told me that solid core helped with public speaking, which I was like, odd because you don't really talk during solid core. But it was like, no, when I'm giving a speech and my hands are shaking, it reminds me of the shakes at solid core, and I can push through that. It reminds me that I can push through anything. And so when you add those things up, right, the effectiveness, the community, and this brand that feels like something bigger than the workout itself, it creates this evangelism amongst our client base that is just so powerful and creates the virality and the word of mouth and all the things that you sort of talked about. Like I said, I'm really blessed, and we have an amazing team that helps this brand come to life every day and keeps perpetuating those things.
Yeah, very cool. But those things don't come about by accident. You guys obviously are very intentional. And like you said, you really try to understand your customer and do some really unique things to increase engagement. And one of the things I was reading about that really stuck out was the earned merch. Can you talk a little
Oh,
bit about
yes.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have this like phrase that I've been saying for the last year or two is that solid core merch can't just be bought, it has to be earned. And there are lots of people who reach out to us and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to wear more solid core merch. Why don't you sell more solid core merch? And there may be a world in which we enter the merch game again. We used to sell merch a long time ago and it wasn't very successful for us, so we stopped doing it. But the way that we've been thinking about merch recently has been way more strategically, which is that there's a pride that comes when you earn something. And the type of person who shows up at Solid Core, the type of person who shows up to do something hard, knowing that it's going to be hard and shows up again, is the kind of person who doesn't want to just be gifted something. They want to actually feel like they earned it. And so we've been able to use merch through our challenges as a way to help people connect with that sort of self-competitive nature that a lot of our clientele ends up having. As an example, we did a big challenge in December that we call our Solidays Challenge. It usually runs for the first couple of weeks of December before people start to kind of disconnect for the holiday season at the end of the year. And there was a hoodie on the line that if you took 10 classes over the course of 14 days, it's a lot of class,
Yeah,
that you earned this hoodie. And people were calling it the Birkin hoodie because people were like clamoring to get it. They were
the
like,
Birkin
I mean,
hoodie.
I took a 10 p.m. class to try to make sure I got my 10 classes in to earn this hoodie. And I was probably one of the more sane people, right? There were people who were doing crazy things to earn this hoodie, but it just shows you the power that when you have a product or a service that people view as being transformative to their life, that when you can sort of galvanize your community to rally around a goal, that you can create this energy that has been really powerful for us. And so merch has been an amazing tool that we are excited to continue with in the future.
I love it. If we had a solid core here, I would have definitely tried.
Soon enough, soon enough. If we're not in your neck of the woods yet, wherever you may be listening to this podcast from, don't worry, we're on our way.
Yeah. Awesome. I've taken up a lot of your time, so I don't want to take up too much more, but I would love to end with just a couple more questions. One of which is just any advice for fitness operators out there who may be listening, especially as we look towards the next, year. What would you just say to them if they're looking for any best practices?
I'd go back to something that I've already mentioned on this podcast, and so I won't repeat it fully, but I'll just say we as an industry have a lot to learn from ourselves 100%, and we should do that, right? Like exchange best practices to other people with other people who are kind of in your sort of similar sphere. But I think we actually have more to learn from people who are outside of our industry. And so the biggest piece of advice that I would give to people is find ways to learn from those who have come before us in other consumer products and services that have been doing this and at this for decades, if not centuries. So find those people in retail, find those people in technology, et cetera. Find those people in food and restaurants and leverage those learnings as you continue to build up both your team, but also your internal systems and processes.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been spending a lot of time on that's outside the industry is AI. I don't know if that's been on
Yes.
your radar.
It's very much on our radar, and I will say personally, I'm ashamed to admit this, but I'm usually like on the cutting edge of technology. I've always been a technology nerd. I've always adopted early. I'm one of those people that actually has like my first and last name as my Gmail because like I was an early adopter when people were only giving out like 5 invites to Gmail. But AI in my personal life, I've been so delinquent on adopting. But in the workplace, I've really pushed our team, and frankly, our teams have actually, really pushed themselves to think about what role AI can play, both internally for some back of house systems, but also how it helps us serve our consumer better, even in forward facing ways. And so there's some things that we're tinkering with in the background that I'm really excited about that are going to, I think, be transformational for our business.
Yeah, awesome. Well, keep me in the loop on anything that you think would be beneficial for others to know because it's such a new space. Everyone's just experimenting right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, lastly, what excites you the most about the next 1 to 2 years for Solid Core that maybe wouldn't be obvious from people on the outside?
I think the biggest thing that excites me about where we are today that probably isn't obvious to others is that we now are at a size and scale where we can start to make some big moves. I think that for a long time, rightfully so, we kind of executed a playbook that was pretty linear, right? It was like, this is what we're doing. We don't really have a lot of resourcing in terms of team, and we certainly didn't have a lot of resourcing in terms of dollars to like experiment outside of the lines and make some big moves and try some big bets, some of which might work and some of which might not. And I'm excited that we have, through discipline and hard work and an incredible team of people, both here at HQ, but importantly out in the field, we've gotten our business to a size and a scale and a stability that we're going to be able to make some of those moves that are like a little bit different. They're going to be a zag. It's going to be a little unexpected. It's going to be like, wait, solidcore is doing what? Why are they doing that? But it's going to be ways for us to connect with our consumer in new and different ways that, again, some of them may work and some of them may not, but through all of them, we will learn. But I think we'll make the brand stronger. So I'm excited about the ability to experiment.
Is there anything else that you want to share that I didn't ask?
Come see us under the blue lights. If you have not taken a solidcore class, I invite you in. Don't be intimidated. The class is extremely challenging, but it's challenging regardless of your fitness level because we can modify and amplify it to be where you are. And the idea of pushing yourself to get something greater is something that I think we all recognize. The best things in life come through hard work. And so let us show you how you can do that for yourself, both physically and mentally at Solidcore.